discuss with her facilitating holistic growth and development towards a child-friendly future as we look ahead to International Children's Day this coming Sunday. Ms. Goring, thanks for being patient and welcome to the platform.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Our pleasure to have you on here this morning. Sunday, a very important observance. Let's start there. Why is it important for us to pause annually and highlight our children and celebrate children as part of the international observance?
We need to recognize that children are important. Without children, there's no continuity for society. It's important to also recognize that children have a voice. While they are young and we probably consider them to be immature, they have opinions and their opinions matter.
Thanks for going there. I will go deeper there in just a while, but the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child has been adopted. St.Lucia is party to that convention. What are some of the fundamental components of it?
So the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child really encourages and advocates that children are citizens. They are vulnerable citizens and have opinions and require that their needs be met by responsible adults in a holistic approach. So essentially, you have articles under the convention that would guide that focus for children.
Excellent. What are some of the focus areas and articles?
Okay, so children have a right to healthcare, adequate healthcare. They have a right to education. They have a right to social activities, things of that nature. But I also want to highlight that with all the rights spoken about that children have, these rights come with responsibility for children. We don't just advocate that, yes, they have rights, but we have a responsibility to teach children that with these rights, you have a responsibility on their part to access these rights.
Excellent. We'll talk about some of those responsibilities which are attached to the rights which children have. But do you get a sense that there's sufficient awareness, and are we upholding the provisions enshrined in the convention?
Okay, that's two questions you're asking me here. So is there sufficient awareness? I would say there is not sufficient awareness. A few years ago, there was a campaign run where it was on television advertisements of the rights of the child, radio broadcast, and so on. What happens at our department, you would find that periodically through the year, caseworkers within the regions would visit their schools and, speak with children on that level of their rights, responsibilities, child abuse, and how to make a report or speak to an adult if something is uncomfortable for you. But in terms of mass media, we are lacking and falling short here in terms of presenting these rights to the public, making citizens aware of what it stands, what it represents. And your second question was, are we keeping apprised?
Yeah, are we fulfilling the articles under the convention, basically?
Okay, so St. Lucia is making strides. We're making steps. We are not on board with a full ratification of that convention, but there have steps to meeting that compliance throughout the years. The recent one was passing of the Child Care Protection and Adoption Act. But, within that act, there is, some shortcomings as well.
Yeah, but we appreciate it's a work in process, and at least there is that commitment to ensure that the full convention is ratified here on the island. When you examine this year's theme for Universal International Children's Day, the theme inclusion for every child, what does this theme say?
So when we say inclusion for every child, we look at children on a racial basis, a background basis, So we're speaking about access, we're speaking about culture, we're speaking about traditions, we're speaking about healthcare. So we want to advocate again and make awareness so that persons can identify some of the areas that children need their support in, because one agency cannot do it alone. If all citizens rally together and make this a goal, it can eventually be achieved. When we look at the transition from Victoria Hospital to OKEU running as a statutory body, there are concerns as to access, not just for children, but for everybody. And children are one of our vulnerable populations. So these are things that we are looking at and monitoring to see how it's going to impact our children as, that process finalizes.
Yeah. You, as part of the celebrations, the department under which you serve, you've put together Blue Ribbon Day.
Yes.
What's the focus, really?
Blue is the international color for child abuse. So with the blue ribbon, we're signaling an awareness that child abuse is still rampant on the island, but also bringing out the children to participate in it, letting them know that there are safe ways they can report, that they can go to teachers, they can go to their principals, counselors, etc., to report uncomfortable situations.
You pointed to the abuse, but what are some of the other major challenges and issues surrounding children here on St. Lucia?
Major challenges. When it comes to the report, you always encounter fear, okay? Because children are groomed by predators for whatever form of abuse it is. To get them into a comfortable space, they probably are threatened as well. So sometimes it is a difficult process for them to trust the person that they are reporting to keep them safe and also to keep them away from the person causing harm. Another challenge would be our laws. If a child is reporting sexual abuse, and if the mother is not agreeing to press charges, the police cannot continue charging that person. I remember several years ago when we had the former TPP, Mrs. Veronica Charles. She made a statement to that effect on the news, that these are one of the roadblocks to carrying on and charging perpetrators. When you still have this thing in our law where it says that the child is a minor and has to have the guardian or custodian represent them in making that decision.
Excellent.
So augmenting our laws would certainly help with carrying on justice for our children.
A revision of those laws, critical, you're saying, at this particular time. When you look at the agencies that provide care and support for children, do you think that these agencies receive the sufficient resources, and are they prioritized enough in our national agenda?
I would not say that they are prioritized. While the agencies that provide care for children receive support, when you consider the intervention that is needed to provide to these children and the resources it would take, we are falling short. We are falling short on all aspects. The Child Care Protection and Adoption Act and the Domestic Violence passed earlier this year speaks to human services providing counseling for children facing trauma or abuse as a result of, circumstances. The Division of Human Services does not currently have counselors within their structure. So it is not something that can be funded by the government of St. Lucia. So this is something that we are struggling with at this point in time. Any child, just think of it as an adult. You go through trauma. you would require some help to get through a point of restoration. And we are certainly missing that mark for our children.
The counseling, the shortfall in the number of counselors that we have attached to the department, and even nationally, the availability of trained counselors continues to be a concern. How about safe spaces, homes away from the home? Are we improving there in the availability of such safe spaces?
I would not say there's an improvement, but we are making small strides. Under the division, we have the New Beginnings Transit Home, which is a safe space for children who have faced extreme forms of abuse. And it has a limited capacity, and not just in numbers, but then depending on the presentation of the children placed there, they may not be able to accommodate their full capacity because of the requirements for supervision for these children. Yeah. Aside from the residential institutions, when you look at individual homes, persons opening up their hearts and homes to a child in need, that in itself is a challenge as well. Yeah. And, persons often come forward wanting to provide care for a child who's maybe below 2, below 3. But as you start to get older, persons are not willing to take on that responsibility. And it does come with a challenge, so that as well is understandable.
Yeah. Given some of those challenges, the number of counselors that are needed vis-a-vis, that are available vis-a-vis the need, do you think it's now, have we reached to a point now in St. Lucia where it's time to hit that red alarm button, and really begin to put in place the systems and resources necessary to protect our children?
We have been hitting that red alarm button for as long as I've been working at the department. Moving from, excuse me, Miss Clementia Eugene, who I started, who was the director when I joined. Then you went from her to Mrs. Lewis, and now Miss Poyet. These things have always been raised at family caseworkers meeting, at supervisory level meetings, at head of department meetings. I am not sure what it will take for policymakers to grasp the needs of this population and what it takes to present the necessary intervention to help them recover, to provide a foundation that will take them into positive, independent, functioning members of society.
Yeah. Listening to you, it's the willpower that's what's needed. I want to go back to something that you mentioned in your preamble. Whereas we view children as younger than adults, obviously there is an age difference there, but you made the point from the onset that despite the age of a child, they have rights. That is not often appreciated in society like ours, you think?
I don't think that it's not appreciated. I think what we see is that there's a defense, coming from, the adult population, that yes, children have rights, but that does not mean that you don't train your child to respect adults, to respect rules, to respect, authority. These ideals and mannerisms are taught in the family. We know that family is the basic unit of society. This is where a child starts his or her education, and that is where they grow from. Saying that the child has rights does not mean that the adults don't have rights and they don't have responsibility. It is a two-way relationship, if you want to look at it as a partnership. Because when a child comes from a family, you don't raise that child for a family. The child eventually has to go out to school, go out to work, and, have to interact with other members of society. So how do we prepare them to function? How do we prepare them to be lawful, functioning citizens of society?
Yeah. And you were also making the point that whereas children have rights, they have responsibilities as well. Balance of the argument, what are some of the responsibilities of a child?
Okay, so let's take one, I think that's very popular, especially with pubescents and teenagers. They have a right to privacy, right? So you have a right to privacy, but with that privacy comes responsibilities. There are inappropriate websites and social media platforms that are not appropriate for children. And while you have some that are inappropriate, you also have some that come in a subtle manner where children are, fished in to inappropriate conduct. I remember a few years ago there was this game that was popular. I don't remember what it was right now, but within that game, an ad would pop up with a scary Asian-looking kind of creature asking children to get into a suicidal pact. Now, you want your privacy, you want to be able to do things, but adults have a responsibility to protect children. So when your parents indicate to you, you have certain boundaries to operate within your rights, you have a responsibility to listen and to be obedient, because as anything else, you are a child. You are not fully developed physically. And part of the physical component is your brain. The science teaches us that the human brain accomplishes its development at age 24. So not even when you turn 18, which is our current standing for attaining majority or maturity, that you are able to go ahead. It's important that we help children to understand that even when you grow older, we don't know it all. The experiences that one person has when they're 65 can be more than someone who's just 21. There are things that they have faced that they have not yet experienced. So it's important that we teach our children and help them to understand, these basic skills.
Excellent. Oftentimes when we speak abuse of a child, we often relate it to sexual abuse. But there are other forms of abuse which impact children significantly as well, neglect, and others. Can you point to some of the other forms which continue to present themselves to your department?
Okay, so we have psychological abuse, we have physical abuse, we have abandonment, and abandonment and neglect usually go together. And you can also have medical abuse if the child is not or is restricted from having that access by their primary care provider, mother, father, whoever it may be. That is a form of abuse.
To close, your final message to parents in particular and the general society on the verge of another observer of International Children's Day. What is your message to our St. Lucia?
So I believe that all persons who have a responsibility or employment within the area where children are, we need to understand and remember that we all were once children. We may not share the same experiences, but they may be similar. And if we remember some of those experiences, good and bad, I think it will develop an empathetic approach to how we treat children and how we address the issues and what we see before us. If persons can have that mind shift, we can all be a helpline for every child who has, issues or difficulty that they may need assistance with.
Perfect icing on the cake. Remember once that you were a child. I think that will go a long way in how we deal with children. Ms. Goring, I want to thank you for coming on. Happy International Children's Day to you ahead of time. And thank you to you and your department for agreeing to be here and for the service that you extend to the children of St. Lucia.
Thank you for having me, and I note that you're in blue, so thank you for participating in the awareness.
Thanks for noticing. You're most welcome, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, take care.
From the Department of Human Services, my very special guest today, ending our series on and focus on children, the rights of a child, the responsibility of a child, challenges facing children, the opportunities that are available for children here in St. Lucia. Don't forget, Sunday the 20th is International Children's Day. Let's make it good. Let's make it a happy occasion for all of our children. On Saturday is International Men's Day. I hope I could say the same, but there's not much happening in our St. Lucia. We still extend big up and greetings to all the men of our society. Important role, you know, man. There's no society without a man. Don't forget, just about 5 minutes before